Here with the GGB co-host Puppers, and I hope you're back for another edition of College Basketball Upset Today, Friday edition. So, if you didn't know, I was sitting at 2 points I was sitting at 1.5 points. I'm pretty sure I nailed one upset on Tuesday, got a half a point for Monday. So yeah, so 1.5, 2 points. Okay, so I'm sitting at 2 points right now. So at the very least, at the very minimum, today, I will be sitting at 2.5 points going into the weekend, which is a very favorable position to be in. But on the other hand, I think I have a real shot at hitting this one. But let's talk about Thursday's game real quick. Pepperdine actually traveled to Gonzaga, played the 12-0 team, and for a half, it was a competitive basketball game. I thought it was going to slip away from Gonzaga sometimes. I remember I came in here to watch the game. I checked the score. I'm like, oh my God, this is still close at halftime. It was right before halftime. It was like a 3-point game, and then boom, a 3, and it was a 6-point game. Then boom, a steal. It was a 2-point game. It was an 8-point game, and then boom, Pepperdine turned the ball over. I'm like, oh my God, this could easily turn into a 10-point game. But I'm gonna give credit where credit is due. Pepperdine really fought through the adversity on this one. They were like, no, we're gonna stay in this one. We're gonna hang around, right? And that worked for like a half. But that's the closest I've seen anyone play Gonzaga all year. I mean, even Iowa didn't even stay with them for like a half. So I'm very interested to see where this Pepperdine team goes in the future. I'm interested to see if they can actually get it together and compete with Gonzaga, because the only way they get in is if they win the tournament. You know that, right? The WCCC tournament. That's the only way I see them getting in. So I think that's what you need to focus on is, can you beat Gonzaga in the tournament? And that's definitely going to be interesting moving forward. But on Friday, oh, by the way, anyone who bet for the Pepperdine to cover the spread, which I didn't even think was going to happen, they made a lot of money Thursday. On Friday, today, we got at 6 o'clock, number 9 Wisconsin, which is 10-3, traveling to Rutgers, which is unranked this week. Rutgers is normally in the top 25. It was interesting to see that they weren't in the top 25 this week. But Michigan State also dropped out, and so did Northwestern, so it wasn't all that surprising. We're seeing more of the rise of teams that everyone acknowledges in the Big 12 are great. Teams like Michigan, who I don't even believe was on the top 25 to start the year, which is insane how Michigan's really come out of nowhere. Iowa, obviously. Illinois, pretty great team too. So there's a lot of teams that we all kind of... Wisconsin, obviously. So it's going to be interesting. Big Ten basketball is really interesting this year because a slip-up at any certain point could mean it's a very competitive league. You can lose easily almost every game except for against Nebraska. The dang Cornhuskers. But Rutgers is a very good team this year, and especially at home. They're known for playing great at home. In the rack. They almost always win. That's how they were going to make the playoffs last year. They won like one game away, but they won every single game at home. It was amazing. If you went to the rack, you were going to lose. That's pretty much what I walked away learning from watching a Rutgers basketball game last year. I think it's going to stay true this year. I mean, they had the loss in the rack already, which was disappointing, but it was a close loss to Iowa. That just shows you the magic the rack can bring, because normally I don't think Rutgers can compete against Iowa, but they almost beat Iowa, which is insane if you think about it. Now, Wisconsin's traveling to Rutgers. Now, everyone remembers Rutgers. Wisconsin's a top 10 team. It's a top 10 team most of us forget about, but it's a top 10 team nonetheless. People with, like, Trice and Reavers are really good basketball players that are overlooked in the Big Ten. Talking about it, like, everyone focuses on Michigan and Iowa in the Big Ten, and even Illinois gets a little bit more respect than Wisconsin does, which is weird because they have a worse record, but okay. I mean, this is a pretty big game for both teams. Rutgers guard Young leads the Big Ten with 2.4 steals, by the way. But, I mean, if you look at the Big Ten standings right now, Wisconsin's 4, right? 4th in the Big Ten. With a win today, that would bump them up to 3, which is pretty dang good. A 5-2 record, 1 game behind Iowa, 2 games behind Michigan, which, considering how they got absolutely destroyed by Michigan the other day, that's not a bad spot to be, Wisconsin. But what happens if Rutgers wins and Wisconsin loses. Well, that means Wisconsin would drop below Iowa State. Now, they would be at the same level as Ohio State. In conference-wise, I believe the tiebreaker then goes to the overall. And in that instance, Ohio State would actually move to the 4th spot in the Big Ten. Wisconsin would sit at 5 behind Purdue, and then Ohio State would play Illinois on. They would play Illinois on Saturday, tomorrow, and then you'd be hoping, as a Wisconsin fans, that Ohio State loses, so you move back to the 4th spot. So, I mean, there's a case where they don't move, really. They kind of stay in their same spot, but it's going to be interesting. Now, Rutgers, on the other hand, kind of has a decent amount to gain from this one, right? They're sitting at the 8th in the Big Ten, 8th team in the Big Ten. Now, if they win this weekend, that puts them at 4-4 and moves them actually ahead of Minnesota, moving them into the 7th spot. Which isn't a whole lot, but remember, these are the teams that's ahead of them. Michigan, Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, Ohio State, Purdue. That would be the teams that were in front of them if Rutgers was to win today, right? All those teams except for Purdue are ranked. So, also impressive. Minnesota would be beneath them also as a ranked basketball team. So, it's an interesting predicament in the Big Ten because there's so many ranked basketball teams. Being 7th isn't that horrible, especially when you're only 4 games out of first place, which is insane to think about, that you could be in 7th place and only 4 games out of first place. Only 4 games having to fall your way. But Rutgers can really do. It's not much for their reputation, but if they lose, some seriously bad things can happen. You fall to 3 and 5. You know what that happens? You fall beneath. You're sitting at 8 right now. Indiana and Northwestern, putting you in the 10th. You'd be 10th in the Big Ten right now. So the swing is you could get up to as high as 7 with a win, as low as 10 with a loss. So Rutgers has a lot to gain from a win here. And not a lot to gain, but a lot to lose with a loss here. They want to stay in this ever-competitive Big Ten. They have to win this one. This becomes a must-win basketball game for Rutgers. It's also interesting for Wisconsin. They also need to be very close to Iowa and Michigan if they really want a chance to take home the Big Ten title like they did last year with a tie, I think, with Maryland. That's the big question. And the big question is, which one team do you think is better? The line, people who set the line gave Rutgers the 5-point lead, mainly because Rutgers is in fact playing at home, and everyone knows they don't really lose in the RAC, even with no fans there. I'm really hoping we get fans back next year. It feels so empty without fans in the stands, so that's so disappointing. But remember, this is the only game I have to pick of the day. But if I had to pick, this is the most absolute no-brainer I've ever seen. Rutgers is a very good basketball team, and not to mention, Wisconsin's on a slump as of late, and not to mention that, Rutgers is at a place they almost never lose, and not to mention that, it's the only game of the day. So this is the most obvious pick I've ever made. Hey everybody, this is GGB, co-host Pepper saying adios amigos, and go Scarlet Knights.